Let's pray. Merciful God, be with us as we encounter your word and as your word encounters us. Help your word to enter our lives, our thoughts, our considerations, that may awaken things in us that we often don't consider or keep front and center. Speak to us again today, as we pray always. Today may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be fully and acceptable in your sight. O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So when I started this sermon on Thursday and Friday, I didn't realize that we would be taking one of my cats to Winchester to the vet. And I could go back today after worship to pick the cat up or figure out what's going on, what we're going to do. But to get into this, over the years, my family has had great pets. Dogs, parakeets, cats. Cats came later in my household. I was the guy that started on the cats. But seemingly ages ago, before I ever started seminary, I had a Siamese cat. She was something else. Tough, smart, strong. And when I went to seminary, I left the cat with my parents, who had kids come to think she was the cat's meow. They wanted her. So I knew she'd have a good home. She could play around the house near the lake. She would even occasionally go out on the dock to see what was happening. So neat cat all around. So one week I was home from seminary, and the cat, of course, ordinarily would hang around, but one of her duties at night was to do the last minute perimeter rounds. She policed the property. And it was just a little while later, while I was reading, that I smelled the call to action before we ever heard it. Yes, the doors and the windows were open. And the cat had surprised a skunk outside at point blank range. And then we heard the little anguished meow saying, "Oh no, poor me, what is this?" So we rushed to the door. She was nearly stunned, but she got to the door and was immediately taken to the bathroom. And thanks to Clairol herbal essence, 3 or 4 times, or 5 or 6, we got most of the smell out. But you know, it gets down in the ears, under the eyelids, and just everywhere. And so the cat went out into the house and began to groom herself, still feeling, poor me. Why did I get nailed like this? Then it was time for me to go to bed as well. My parents had wisely gone to bed, closed their door. So the cat came into my bedroom, which she was prone to do, hopped up on the bed with me. So I got to spend the night smelling this interesting combination of herbal essence and skunk. And it was just, it's what you do. We offered care and comfort to that poor animal. And today, often when I smell skunk, I remember that event. It was up close and personal. Today, when I read the story about Mary anointing Jesus' feet, you have to think about the overpowering smell, expensive perfume. Has anybody ever spilled $200 worth of perfume, or had one of their children spill $100 or so worth of perfume? Most people don't buy perfume like that, although I know a few people do. Most of us buy perfume in tiny little bottles. It's very expensive, and just as Brill Green used to say, a little dab will do you. And I thought about Mary anointing Jesus' feet, and I did what I usually do when I start thinking about these sermons. I engage in what Paula does with you in Soup and Silence, doing Lectio Divina. So I listened to the overall sense, and then I started listening to particular words and phrases to hear what God might be saying to me this time through this passage. And I had a couple of things. I actually thought of another way to go about it this morning, which I might use later this season. But in this, I began thinking about the lingering smell pervading the house, everybody who is there. You just have to think about how powerful that smell would have been. Then you would remember what Mary had done. And in fact, that's exactly what has happened through history, because this has been recorded in the Synoptic Gospel and in this. So the church, by keeping this in our scriptures, has had the memory of this anointing, which has been given to us for some time. Now, I would imagine anyone who's ever encountered a skunk over time knows what that's like. And trying to figure out, well, basically what I was thinking about was anyone who after that time had encountered Mary, even after the crucifixion and the resurrection, would have smelled that perfume in her hair. She herself would be a reminder of who she was for Jesus and who Jesus was for her. And that is exactly what has happened. So the first question I have is, what does Jesus smell like? Because she poured this over his feet. What smells remind us of God? And there's ample evidence that certain smells conjure up associations deep, deep, deep in our past. The smell of certain sachets may powerfully bring to mind childhood associations with cedar chests and perhaps closets, clothes that people would have worn, and people who were in our lives. So even though our family doesn't keep sachets, when I brought some of my mom's stuff back, I found a sachet in one of the dresser drawers, and it was like, oh my goodness, I haven't smelled this in years. Same thing with my dad's mother, who had an absolute passion for Cody's Emerald perfume. She used it in such quantities that I couldn't escape it. I haven't smelled it in quite some time, but I'll bet if I did, I remember all those days spent with her. The fragrance of honeysuckle, azaleas in summer, they remind me of spring days, the days of my youth, when I didn't seem to have a care in the world. And I think this is true for all of us sitting here. There are things we do and remember that bring alive those memories in the past. Now, what about this other part that spoke to me? Jesus said, the poor you will have always, but you do not always have me. It's a difficult saying, isn't it? But you all can teach me what it means, right? Surely somebody has a better response to this than I do. Well, let me suggest that over time, this is an almost overwhelming remark that's pulled out at awkward times and in awkward situations. It's very easy for us to imagine that the poor represent an insurmountable issue, dare I say, problem for us. It's almost Jesus saying, you know, guys, you're always going to have the poor. It's one of those things that you just can't get over, right? So don't worry about it, as the song goes. Don't worry, be happy. That's not the way the passage works. And if you go back to Luke's passage, but really all of the Gospels, Jesus pays attention to the poor. When you read stories about the Sermon on the Mount, the Sermon on the Plain, Jesus says specifically, blessed are the poor. Or he says, blessed are the poor in spirit. They go together. See, it is about material poverty. It's not all about material poverty. You can be poor in spirit even when you have enough and more. And I think just about all of us have had points in time where we have been impoverished in spirit. We've either lost a loved one, or perhaps we've had financial collapse, or something has happened in our lives and we feel, poor me, what do I do next? It's natural. It's normal. And people who said, get over it, that's a little too glib, Poor me. Somehow, we have to get over this idea of being numb to the plight of the poor and walk on by. And we have to remember, Jesus did have this special relationship with the poor. So you know something important is going on here than just the words. We also know that the second part of that, you do not always have me, runs against other parts of the gospel and our teaching. We do have Jesus. When we turn to Christ, Jesus will be there for us. And it may take time for us to appreciate how the Lord is present. But the Lord is present and is always present. The Lord is with us to deliver us. Somehow I suspect that even after we, or people, have put on airs and tried to believe we have risen above the great unwashed masses of people in poverty, we're really not much different. There are times when we may lose sight of Jesus. Perhaps we imagine that we have succeeded on our own and we deserve to keep all the spoils of our own success. At other times, we may have been distracted by our culture, its skepticism, its cynicism, and we lose sight of Jesus. And we begin to discover certain things fail us, and we say, poor me, what do I go after next? I can tell you, buying that new sports car will give you a momentary pleasure. Paying for the insurance and gas on it, not so much. And when you want to put the family in the back of it, Bill, I'm not talking about your Corvette. But when you try to put the family in the back of your Corvette, you might say, poor you. That's not quite it. But when we discover that we are lost without anything lasting on what to hold, you have a problem. We begin to understand the poverty that grips so many people. So for most of us, when we find we no longer know God or where to find God, then we feel the poverty of our souls. Now, according to the passage, Judas also brings forward another part of this. He realized the value of what had been extravagantly expended over Jesus. And Mary, wiping her hair. They say that 1 pound of perfume was at least the annual purchase of a typical person at the time. Frankly, it was probably more. So Judas saw that he had lost all of the proceeds that could have been made from selling that, which he could have dipped into and used for his own. He had been impoverished by this extravagant gift, this expense over Jesus. Later, we see that he would sell out Jesus for blood money at the temple. That shows for a moment where Judas's priorities were at the moment. Now, I suspect that when we discover our spiritual poverty, we're going to be tempted to cry out, "Poor me." And if we wonder where Jesus is to be found at that point, I have a feeling it's going to be in that poverty. He's closer than we realize. And I suspect we'll always find Christ our Lord, God our Lord, among the poor in spirit. So listen to the cries of the poor, and you may hear the word of God, the presence of God being expressed. When the poor find faith in God, it is a testament that is so impressive to us. God speaks through the poor. Not through poverty, but through the poor. And when God leads us to the poor, and the poor in spirit, people in the hospital, the people in the nursing homes, the people out on the streets, and the homeless, sometimes we feel that in our expressions of grace, we get more out of that than we would ever have thought. Something can restore our souls, even when our heart breaks for other people. The poor we will have always, even when we lose touch with the God of our salvation. Scripture does not romanticize the poor, poverty, but Jesus Christ gives generously, extravagantly among them. Jesus' words remind us that when we look to the God of our salvation, we will find that God can still give us grace in our deserts and our poverty every day. I'm going to give you one last thing. When we translate that passage, an alternative way, which is perfectly correct to translate, is not to read "the poor you have always," but "keep the poor with you always." Keep. Instead of being a declarative, it's an imperative. And Jesus is speaking to his followers, and he's saying, keep the poor with you always. Don't abandon them. Keep them. And it reminds us a little bit of Jesus' confrontation of Peter after his resurrection. Jesus asks 3 times after the meal, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter said, "Lord, I do. You know I do." Jesus says, "Feed my lambs. Feed my sheep." 3 times this happens. Remember the poor. Remember the poor in spirit. And I suspect that keeping faith with Jesus also reminds us to keep faith not only with the rich and powerful, for what that might gain us, but also with the poor and the outcasts, the people who have no way to repay us, except with their relationships, their friendships, or their gratitude and their witness. Jesus really never emphasized any other commandments. He didn't give us any commandments that we hear in the New Testament, except to affirm, you shall love the Lord your God, all of your resources, your strength. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So I think we're all people who not only need others, but we need the love of God to humanize us. God humanizes us with our relationships, just as Jesus did, keeping us grounded in the kingdom of heaven. And that brings us back to Lent. Just as the poor are often grateful for the basics in life, so too can we learn to practice gratitude for what God gives us in grace. For those with eyes to see and ears to hear, practice gratitude and feel appreciation for having enough, and maybe enough to share each day. Easter celebrations will come, but in the meantime, let us open our eyes to the sights and the sounds and even the smell of this new season, the freshness of spring. Give thanks for the beauty, the this time and our daily bread. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. Lord, you speak to us in so many ways. And sometimes when we are afraid that we have lost you, you remind us of disciplines, of smells, of memories, of ways that bring us back to you. So too today, may your presence in our lives evoke within us a lifetime of faith, of your grace, and renewed appreciation. Amen.